The clock is ticking, which means one thing. It is time for the college football power hour as we are fresh off of week 4 in college football. That is Jason Fitz. He is Adam Breneman, and I am Caroline Fenton. A ton of action that we need to break down, but let's start with the big one earlier today, USC at Michigan. Michigan wins this one and doesn't even throw. Alex Orji, who's taking over the starting quarterback, doesn't even throw for 40 freaking yards. A massive, massive win for Michigan in the Big Ten standings, Fitz.
Yeah, and this is, I think, Adam, the most demoralizing loss a team could have when you think about the fact that we all knew, everybody in the stadium knew, everybody knew that Michigan wasn't going to throw the football, and there wasn't a dang thing that USC could do about it. This game came down to the wire. Michigan gets the unexpected win at the very end, and I just kept thinking the whole time, this is the type of loss for USC that will sting, and then the type of win that starts to establish some level of take a shot, culture, and identity for who Michigan's going to be. This just felt like this was bigger than a football game. This has long-reaching consequence to the season.
But I almost feel like it doesn't even figure out, culture or identity, because I don't think that Michigan knows what they are offensively. Because right now, all they are offensively is running the football. That's
but they
all
know
they
what
do.
they're
It is
not.
they know what they're not.
They
and
know
it is
they
very
knew they couldn't
clear,
throw the ball.
It is very clear that Michigan does not trust Alex Orji with the ball in his hands.
For Michigan, though, they're really playing a style of play like what Army and Navy play. I mean, I just called the Army game today. Pretty similar offenses. Run the football on first, second, and third down. You have a great offensive line. Mollings, the running back, came out, kind of broke out of nowhere today and had a day, the 63-yard run that ended up winning Michigan the game. What did we learn about Michigan? Their pass game is brutal. Offensive line is really good, but the defense is legit. Mason, Graham, some of those guys on the defensive front, there are 7, 8 NFL players on the Michigan defense. So if Michigan can lean into that Army, Navy type, running the football, controlling the clock, running literally just the Wildcat every single play with Alex Orji, they have something there. I still think that at some point, Michigan, it's going to catch up to Michigan. They're not going to be able to win games against some high-powered offenses, and Alex Orji isn't the answer for them at quarterback long-term because they clearly don't believe in his arm. Then for USC, how about welcome to the Big Ten? I mean, that's Big Ten football now, and it's hard to lose games when you only give up 32 yards passing. That's hard to do, and USC found a way because of the crucial pick six, missed tackles in critical moments, which has been a Achilles heel for USC for a long time. It was disappointing because the USC defense played so well in the second half, and then in the final drive of the game, collapsed when it mattered the most. If there's any positive for USC, Miller Moss looked pretty good. I thought he had good pocket movement. He's got some great weapons in Zachariah Branch and Jacoby Lane and Deuce Robinson. But USC is still very much alive, but they got to clean up those little mistakes. But after that game, weirdly, Fitz, I have more belief in USC long-term in the Big Ten this season than I do Michigan.
I honestly think we say this how often. If you played this game 10 times on a neutral field, who do I think wins it? I still think that USC wins it. And I know Michigan fans are going to lose their minds about not getting enough credit. Again, we can't go so far from one end of the spectrum to the other when we have this conversation about who Michigan is. It's okay to admit they're rebuilding. This was a nice win during the process of a rebuild, but it doesn't suddenly shift the expectations. You're right. I don't think that you just can't lean on your defense to be Superman every single drive of every single game. And I'm looking at this team thinking that's what it's going to take. So, but if I'm USC, I'm devastated. If I'm USC fans, I'm devastated. I just got a real hint that I might not be as competitive in the Big Ten as I want to be. But if I'm Michigan, I'm turning around and saying, hey, this was cute, Caroline, but I'm not suddenly like changing all of my expectations for where the Wolverines are headed.
No, I wouldn't at all. I mean, the outcome you're going to take 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. But it's the process that was a really freaking ugly win. And for USC, we've made so much of the changes defensively. D'Anton Lynn comes in as a defensive coordinator in year one. How much did they talk about on every USC broadcast about how much muscle that defensive front put on in the offseason to be able to compete in the Big Ten, to be able to compete in the trenches? Everyone and their mother in that stadium, watching on TV, everyone in America knew what Michigan wanted to do. They didn't throw the football. Everyone knew that Michigan was going to run the football. When Alex Orji was named the starting quarterback, we all knew that Michigan wanted to run the football. Yet USC still couldn't stop it. It was like an Uno reverse card. It was like they had their own Connor Stallions on the sideline because everyone knew what Michigan was going to do. They had all the answers, Fitz, but they still couldn't stop the run. And I think that is a kind of a bring back down to reality for maybe where this USC defense is. Improved, of course, from last season, but still a lot of warts, as you pointed out, Adam. They have issues tackling, especially when it mattered most.
Definitely an improvement from last season. Caroline, I will say this. If USC could play defense the way they played all in the entire third quarter and until about 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they'll win a lot of football games this fall. But that last drive of the game, they cannot give up an explosive run, 63-yard run, and have to be able to make tackles in those big moments. I think there's bright signs for USC. This defense this defense last year at USC gives up 400 yards on the ground to Michigan and gives up 40 points. So there are improvements. And that game played out the exact way Michigan wanted it to play out. The way the first half happened, how they were able to control the clock continuously. The pick six was a crucial play in the game. The game's completely different if that play doesn't happen. So there's positives. USC has to get rid of the self-inflicted mistakes. It's been a problem for USC for a long time. They have to get out of the era of missed tackles and bad clock management. But if they do, I still believe USC has a chance. They control their own destiny in the Big Ten now. They have some winnable games ahead. If they can clean up those small mistakes and Miller Moss plays the way that he played today for most of the game, this is a team that I think can make a run at the Big Ten championship.
I agree with all of that. And by the way, in the college football playoff expansion era, I don't think one loss needs to suddenly be a reason we all lose our minds. That being said, I think there is something that this is just part of the fabric of who a team is. A good defense, not even a great defense. A good defense can give up a ton of yards. They can bend the entire game. They got to be able to get the stops when they need the stops. And to me, Adam, as smart as what you're saying is with the way that defense played in the second half, man, you've got to be able to get the stop when you need the stop, which takes some level of discipline, takes some level of not letting the moment get bigger than you are. And at the end of the game, to make that sort of mistake, if a quarterback makes the same mistake, we sit here and just absolutely we destroy that quarterback for not having the mental toughness. Felt like when they needed to stop, they couldn't get one. And at some point, that's an issue.
In the way that USC lost that game, to your points, Fitz, is demoralizing. To feel like you came back in that game. In the beginning, it looked like it was going to be a blowout, right? Yeah. For then USC to come back, get in a good position, look like they're going to win the game, and give up that final drive to Michigan when everyone knew in the stadium on TV that they were going to run the football. It's demoralizing for your team. So right now, Lincoln Riley's got a challenge on his hands. He's got to go into that locker room and get his guys to believe themselves again when they just lost to a Michigan team that everyone in the country is telling them aren't very good. But if UFC learned one thing this week, it's that the Big Ten is physical, and it is tough to go on the road and win in the Big Ten, and it is super darn tough to beat the defending national champions on the road in the Big Ten. And you can't make mistakes and walk out of there with a win.
Not the warmest welcome into the Big Ten for USC. Also not the warmest welcome into the SEC for Oklahoma as they hosted Tennessee. Tennessee takes that one 25-15. I think there's two different stories here when we talk about this game. There's the Oklahoma perspective of things, and there's the Tennessee perspective of things. And Fitz, that's the team, the preseason, that you were really high on. And then I kept hearing, okay, but they haven't played anyone. And NC State hasn't turned out to be the team that maybe some people expected them to be. Me, I picked them to win the ACC. I was wrong. Idiot. But we wanted to see them tested. We wanted to see Nico Iamaleava on the road, tested against a top 25 defense. And the score, I don't think, indicates how much Tennessee dominated that game, Fitz, for a majority of 60 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and they dominated in the way that really makes me continue to look at Tennessee and say that they are a national championship contender. Say it with me, say it loud. This team plays suffocating defense. I don't understand why we're not talking more about that. And then, frankly, I love the fact that Heupel, who, we all know that he can spread it out, and we talked about it last week on the show. I expected a really simplified offensive game plan. I thought it was more than simplified. They basically went in and said, hey, we're going to control this. We're not going to take any chances. We're simply going to control the line of scrimmage. And they did. Like this Tennessee team is not flashy the way that we want to make Tennessee football flashy. They're not explosive the way we simply want. Like we have these caricatures we want to assign to them. This Tennessee team is not any of those things. It can be, but it can also be a team that just grinds you down, pounds you, and then says, hey, by the way, you're not going to get first downs. You're not going to get sustained drives against this defense. I walk away from this again. I saw exactly what I expected, a double-digit win for Tennessee. And even in that double-digit win, Carolina, I think you make a very good point. This game felt to me more like it was a win by 20 than a win by 10. And Adam, I think Tennessee continues to make a statement that they are among the elite teams in the country.
Tennessee has proven that they're one of the top 5 teams now in college football with how they're playing on both sides of the ball. Going into this game, the storyline for me was the 2 quarterbacks. How does Nico Iamaleava and Jackson Arnold in their first
now?
He's
just willy-nilly Iamaleava. What are we doing here?
I don't even know if I'm saying. They were saying it different on the broadcast, so I don't even know. Nico Iamaleava, whatever it is. Nico and Jackson Arnold in their first big matchup where primetime, national television, 5-star recruits as the starting quarterbacks. Which one comes to play? Nico looked poised and under control and confident that entire game in a tough road environment in the SEC, a really hard place to win at, and got a big win for his team. He wasn't perfect. He didn't try to do too much, though. Didn't turn the football, didn't throw any interceptions, and did what he had to do to leave with a win. Tennessee's defense, not just suffocating Fitz, but how about opportunistic? Making plays when they had to make plays. How about a 2 times in the first half? Tennessee turned the football over. Oklahoma got the ball back. In the first play, Tennessee got the ball right back with a turnover for their defense. So I thought Tennessee did a great job playing complementary football. Defense helped the offense. One area to improve, Tennessee with 10 penalties on the day. That's going to come back and bite them in closer games in the SEC. And then for Oklahoma, Carolina, I mean, Oklahoma's got a quarterback battle now. Yeah. I mean, Michael Hawkins Jr. came in at the end of that game and I thought gave that offense a new life that, quite frankly, Jackson Arnold didn't have. And Jackson Arnold turned the football over too much. You're not going to win games in that conference turning the football over.
And to put that into perspective, Oklahoma recovered a fumble at the 5-yard line. And they couldn't get in the end zone. Jackson Arnold turned the ball over right there. So I'm 1000% with you that now Oklahoma has a legitimate quarterback controversy. That Michael Hawkins Jr. added a little bit of something into that. They saw life in Oklahoma's offense finally when he came in. To finish up my thoughts on the Tennessee side of things, I am with you that today solidified for me that Tennessee's not just a playoff contender, they're a national title contender. And yes, it's because they went on the road and they got tested against a really good defense. Yes, of course, all of that is important and matters. But today proved to me that Tennessee can win games in several different ways. We just talked about Michigan. The only way that they can win games is playing elite defense and running the football. Well, Tennessee can kill you through the air. Tennessee can win you in a shootout, beat you in a shootout. Tennessee can win the 50 to 52 kind of games. Tennessee can also win the conservative, running the football, playing good defense, not getting too cute with it, don't have to throw the ball around the yard. Tennessee can beat you in multiple different ways. Tennessee can beat you defensively. Tennessee can beat you offensively. And that is what separates this team from maybe some of Josh Heupel's former teams at Tennessee that is just such a complete football team.
You make a phenomenal point, Caroline. The most important stat for offensive football, a lot of coaches say, is time of possession. And for Tennessee to control the game the way they did, I think they got 35 or 36 minutes time of possession, which is a lot. I mean, that's a big difference between Oklahoma at 24 or 25, especially when Tennessee plays fast the way they did. I mean, they were playing fast during that game. Don't let them fool you. They were going at that warp speed they play at and still held the ball that long. They controlled the football game the entire 4 quarters and to your point, can prove that they can win multiple different ways. They can win by throwing it down the field. They can win running the football. Nico Iamaleava can be a game manager and not just a downfield passer. Tennessee looked impressive today.
I also, though, want to say that part of the reason they can win games multiple ways is because there was absolutely no room for Oklahoma to run in this game. I just looked it up to make sure that I had the number right. Averaged 1.1 yard per rush. All right, 1.1. And understand that they got a total of 36 yards rushing, 22 of which came from Hawkins, right? So when you start talking about what this defense did to Oklahoma, like I'm sorry. I expected Oklahoma to at least try and run the football, and they couldn't at all get any rhythm going running the ball. And when you can't, you put yourself in such a terrible situation, negative down and distance. Now you become predictable. And now all of a sudden, the Vols are just going to pin their ears back and come after you. They're going to be able to shut you down. I mean, I keep saying this because I think it's worth repeating. If you can't score on Tennessee, they're going to be able to beat you any way possible. I think this defense is becoming quickly elite.
And to be fair, Oklahoma's run game has really been brutal majority of the season.
Yeah.
Like that offensive line's got some serious problems.
Terrible.
But to your point, Fitz, like Tennessee took everything away from Oklahoma. And looking at this quarterback situation, you mentioned how Hawkins had over half of Oklahoma's total rushing yards. Jackson Arnold was the guy that Oklahoma chose. That Dylan Gabriel's at Oregon because Oklahoma and Brent Venables said, this is our guy. This is our quarterback. And in the biggest game of the season so far, he's benched halfway through. I think that speaks volumes about missteps of this coaching staff. And I don't blame the Oklahoma fan base for being incredibly frustrated for that.
Isn't there going to be, Adam, more accountability for those mistakes from coaches, too, in an NIL era? Because now the transfer portal and NIL gives you a chance to reset the position every single year. Well, this is breaking up with your ex and watching your ex go somewhere else and just thrive right in front of everybody. That's exactly like Dylan Gabriel's thriving and is going to have a shot at a national championship. Ain't nobody going to have a shot at a national championship wearing any Oklahoma colors this year.
It is crazy in today's college football how fast things can change, man. Going into this game, Jackson Arnold, the golden boy at Oklahoma, 5-star recruit. They ran the Heisman frontrunner out of town to go to Oregon so they could start Jackson Arnold, their 5-star quarterback. And midway through the third quarter, he's on the bench watching Michael Hawkins Jr. come in. And I'll say this. Jackson Arnold didn't get an entire fair shot at this thing. Run game's terrible at Oklahoma. Offensive line not playing well. Tough schedule to start the year. His first big game on primetime television, everyone watching, is against Tennessee, one of the top teams in the country. But this is SEC football, and you're making a lot of money. Jackson Arnold, you got to perform. And no one cares that your offense isn't running the ball well. You got to make plays. And most importantly, he can't turn the football over. He did that too many times today. And now Michael Hawkins Jr. brings this new life to an offense that can't run the ball. What do you do when you can't run the ball in offense? Bring in a running quarterback, adds a whole new dimension, gives your offense some life a little bit. And Kirk Herbstreit said it on the broadcast in the fourth quarter. Herbstreit said Michael Hawkins Jr. is the quarterback for this Oklahoma team the rest of this season. Mark my words is what he said, and I'm with him. I think Hawkins will be the quarterback next week.
And you make a good point, Fitz, about maybe the leash gets shorter for coaches. I think it's also shorter potentially, or maybe just the commentary is different now in an NIL era with the players. That now the conversation becomes surrounding Jackson Arnold or any, high profile player that we know is collecting NIL checks. The conversation becomes, well, what are we paying that guy $1 million for? That's our $500,000 quarterback. That's our $3 million quarterback. At Tennessee, it's paying dividends. It coughed up the cash for Nico Yamaliava, and it looks like a pretty good decision. But we will continue this conversation. Hit a quick break. On the other side, the sky is falling. Stick around. All right, it's our favorite thing to do on a Saturday night is to overreact. We don't need to keep our emotions in check. We don't need to double check the numbers and the stats to make sure that it's a measured take. It's overreaction time. The sky is falling. Adam, where's the sky falling?
Sky's falling at NC State. Tough way to start the season for NC State. So much preseason excitement around this program and hype. Top 25 ranking. Everyone talking about possible ACC championship. Just a load of buzz. And then to get boat raced the way they did by Clemson and Tennessee in a very weak ACC conference is a tough way to start the year for NC State. Dave Dorian, their head coach, who's done a good job building that program. But right now, this NC State team looks nothing like what I thought they would look like at the start of the season. And now they're in a tough spot with 2 losses just a few weeks into the season, trying to figure out their place in the ACC. Miami looking really good. It doesn't look like what this program thought it would look like going into week 1.
And, I often think, if not now, then when? Like, this is supposed to be sort of a gettable version of Clemson, and this is supposed to be the year that NC State steps up. And NC State fans certainly led any of us that didn't pick NC State to win the ACC. We all heard it, right? Like, all coming out, like, you don't know ball, like all of that. Like, you get the yelling and the screaming about all of it. I'm looking at it thinking there is some level of the expectations weren't wrong for NC State. I think the execution has been the problem. Like, there is the talent to win football games. You should not get that outclassed by Clemson. I don't care what's happening. It shouldn't have been that, because what was the final of that? 59-35. And the game didn't feel that close. It just didn't feel that close. It felt like a video game where Clemson could score every time they touched the ball if they wanted to. There was nothing NC State could do about it. That feels pretty inexcusable, Caroline, because the ACC might be bad. NC State might not be a great football team, but they should not be that far away from where Clemson is right now.
They shouldn't. And I know that Grayson McCall's banged up, but you've got a veteran quarterback. You've got a ton of veterans on this team. You have one of the best receivers in the ACC in KC Concepcion. I don't think that NC State has any right to get blown out as many times as they've had. And I know it's just twice, but getting blown out twice by week 4, it doesn't bode well for NC State. But I do wonder, where are they at right now? Like, where is this team at? You know, you get embarrassed on the road in a neutral site against Tennessee. You get embarrassed at Clemson. Like, it's not like NC State's schedule is that difficult down the road. You got Northern Illinois, which, could be a giant slayer there. Wake Forest, Syracuse, at Cal, Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech. Like, that's not an overly menacing schedule. So I wonder, with NC State, is it, okay, we had 2 really difficult opponents in the first 4 weeks of the season. We'll get right, we'll turn around, and we'll beat teams that we should beat? Or is this locker room in a more uncomfortable position? I don't know that question. And I'm not assuming that it is, but I wonder where a program is at after 2 losses like that.
I'm more concerned that we're going to now watch them wade through the waters of the cupcakes and then change our opinion on them when what we're seeing is probably pretty accurate right now, right? Like, yeah. Maybe NC State is better than the hot garbage that you just listed on their schedule. Maybe they're better than the soft Charmin that they're about to face. But at the same time, they're certainly not a program that belongs in the conversation with some of these others that you just mentioned. They've proven that to us. Like, at this point, you've proven that you are not in the same realm as the top 15 programs, top 20 programs in the country right now. So what I don't want to do is overreact when it feels like they've gotten right, because I'm not sure they got right, Adam, or if they're just beating up on people that aren't qualified to take them down.
The shocking part about NC State for me was how in their 2 losses, they were completely non-competitive in both of them, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They had no chance. They looked like the athletes didn't look like they were from the same world as Clemson and Tennessee athletes. And then I look at their schedule, Caroline. I agree. It's not a hard schedule, but I have a hard time seeing them get to 7 wins. They got some of these teams are decent teams that have played better. Cal's pretty good. They got Georgia Tech, who beat Florida State. Like, there's good teams. Northern Illinois coming up for NC State, who's a top 25 team. So NC State was top 20 preseason, or they're not playing like a top 20 team right now. And to Fitz's point, if not now, this was the year. You bring in Grayson McCall. Everyone wants it to happen. If not now, when's it going to happen for NC State?
Can I give you guys a team, though, that the sky isn't falling on? Can we be poly-positive in a negative segment?
I like it. Come on.
Because, or Peter positive, should you prefer? However you want it. However you want the positivity to come. Look, I think a lot of people are saying the sky is falling about Oklahoma State. And I think that does 2 things. I think it sort of undervalues a little of what we saw, and it drastically undervalues Utah in this process. Like, I don't know what Utah is going to have to do to get the street cred that Utah has kind of earned in this process. I just don't know when we will, as a college football collective mindset, just acknowledge that, like, hey, Utah's one of those teams that's actually always going to kind of be upper echelon in their conference. They're going to kick the snot out of some people, and they did that today, Adam. Like, I don't think that this was an Oklahoma State problem. I think this was an indication that Utah's actually a much better program than we think right now.
The frustrating part for Oklahoma State is you're going against a Utah team without Cam Rising, their star quarterback. And when Utah doesn't have Cam Rising, they're a completely different team. And still lost to them at home is a tough pill to swallow for Oklahoma State. My thoughts on Oklahoma State are this, and I've had these thoughts for a long time. They're not terrible. They're a good team, but they have a ceiling at Oklahoma State. Their defense is not very good. But that doesn't mean they can't win a Big 12 championship or make the championship game when the conference is wide open. But Utah also plays a different style of football than Oklahoma State plays when it comes to some of the pass game stuff they do. What Oklahoma State's used to seeing throughout the year and in the past game and some of that zone RPO stuff that Utah, quite frankly, doesn't really do that Oklahoma State sees all the time. So I think there's a tough matchup for Oklahoma State, but they have a ceiling. I don't ever see Oklahoma State going and running the table and becoming a top 5, top 10 team in college football. And the frustrating part is just that this was the Utah team that was vulnerable, that was exposed without their star quarterback, had Isaac Wilson starting, Zach Wilson's brother, and couldn't get the job done.
But I'll counter that quickly and just say, what if Utah is so good that even with their backup quarterback, they still put up 456 yards? Even with 3 turnovers, they still found a way to get this win. Even in a game where, they dominated in every 42 minutes time of possession. 42
That's
minutes
insane.
time of
That's
possession.
absurd.
You think about that's all coming from a team that, frankly, there's just, I think Utah's that good. I know they're number 12, and I think that's probably right. But it felt like today what we were watching, we always say we're going to figure out who the haves and the have-nots are. I think Utah is a team that if they clean some things up and if they get Cam Rising back, has a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. I don't think Oklahoma State is that right now. So, I guess maybe my expectations were less coming into the game. So, Caroline, I feel less panic in this.
I don't think it's a panic-worthy kind of loss. Mostly because that was a competitive football game. It was sloppy. Oklahoma State turned the ball over. Utah turned that into opportunities. Scored a touchdown off of an interception, not a pick six necessarily, but on the next possession. So I look at that and I can say, okay, well, those are definitive things that we can circle and say, we messed that up and we gave our opponent opportunities in a close game and we can't be doing those kinds of things. I'm with you. I don't view Oklahoma State as a national title contender. I do think that they're a very good football team. And I look at the Big 12. I don't think that there's going to be any team in the Big 12 that gets out unscathed because I think that this is a deep enough conference. So one conference loss, I don't think is the end of the world if Oklahoma State has, visions of getting to the Big 12 title game. Where else is the sky falling, Fitz?
I will say this. The sky was almost falling for Missouri. And
I was going to bring them up.
It's only fair. You go to double overtime against Vandy, and Vandy should have been able to take it to triple overtime. There was a chip shot field goal. Vandy lost this game more than Missouri won it. And I kept looking at it thinking, no, there's going to be a time when Missouri pulls away. And I think it was Adam last week on the show that said, hey, Missouri is not a college football playoff team. They kind of showed some of that today. So I'm not saying the sky is falling in the sense that everything's an abject disaster, but I do think it's fair when you have that sort of a game against Vandy that you look at it and say, man, I'm not sure Missouri is in the same league that we thought they were in.
The old adage, they are who we thought they were. Missouri is not who we thought they were. Missouri is not this SEC title contender. Missouri doesn't look to be replicating the magic that they had of last season. The offense, Brady Cook doesn't look like the Brady Cook that we saw last year, and I don't know what it is. Is it the loss of Cody Schrader and his threat in the run game? Because they returned every single receiver from that team last season. And I think at this point in the year, there's still so much that we don't know that records on paper can be very deceiving. Missouri's 4-0. And it's crazy to say the sky is falling in Columbia, Missouri, when Missouri is undefeated. But the last 2 weeks, they've been ugly, grinded out kind of wins, Adam, that I don't think a top 10 team should be struggling with the likes of Boston College into Vanderbilt. That's no disrespect to those teams. I expected more from Missouri.
Caroline, anytime you play close games to Boston College and Vanderbilt and you're the 7th ranked team in the country, it's not a very good sign. And Missouri is not the team that everyone's just saying they are around the country. And most importantly, the most important reason is quarterback Brady Cook's not playing well. You just said it. Losing Cody Schrader. What does that have for Brady Cook's confidence? What's the dynamic of losing him as a dynamic playmaker in that offense? You look at that Boston College game, and it looked like Boston College was going to win that game. And Missouri found a way to squeeze it out. Vanderbilt is not a good football team. Just not good. Beat Virginia Tech early in the season, which was a shocker. Virginia Tech's not a good team. Vanderbilt is a bad team. And to play Vanderbilt the way Missouri did should tell us everything we need to know about Missouri. I don't care that they haven't lost a game yet this season. They have now showed us 2 times in a row who they are as a team. Missouri is not a top 10 team in college football.
And another thing to look at too, we look at their schedule, and we talk a lot about quality of schedule. And, if that 9-3, 10-2 team that could be on the outside looking in of a college football playoff. Those quality wins and wins over top 25 opponents, like those matter whenever you're measuring inches in terms of college football playoff resumes. So when you're playing close games against teams that you should be beating, well, now all of a sudden having a really light schedule all of a sudden becomes a negative. It becomes a demerit on your report card, Fitz.
No, you're right, because the College Football Playoff Committee is going to give you the dreaded eye test over and over again, and they're going to say they just didn't look good in games they should have controlled. And I will remind everybody, game control is an actual metric that the committee uses. So they look at this, and the game control metrics for the last 2 weeks, advanced analytics are going to show you that Missouri's not very good. So that's all going to factor into the committee's decision. You're right.
We are going to find out about Missouri a little bit when they play Texas A&M now, coming up in 2 weeks, I think. That'll be a fun one just to see where Missouri's at. Another currently top 25 team, and can Missouri handle business against A&M? I may change my tune a little bit if they do, but from what we've seen so far, I'm not impressed with Missouri.
And I think if there's one thing that we've learned through 4 weeks, this is such a week-to-week game. It's such a week-to-week game. It's such a week-to-week league. All right, we'll take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to raise a glass and pour one out in our little college football power hour party. We continue coming up next. All right, back here on the pod. Fitz, who are we raising a glass to?
I had this revelation, right? I'm sitting there looking at the scores, and I'm just scrolling through and making sure I'm not missing anything. And I saw that, Northern Illinois lost their game today to Buffalo. Now, I'm not raising a glass to a team losing, but I am raising a glass to the rest of the group of five because I realized something. Now, there will be an entire group of fans that are hanging on pins and needles for every loss of a team that we may not have even paid attention to last year, right? Like the fact that Northern Illinois lost changes the life for Liberty, changes the life for Memphis, changes the life for UNLV that I mentioned on this show every week, right? Like all of the rest of group of five teams that are just sitting on the outside looking and trying to find their way into the top 25, trying to find their way into the college football playoff. It makes games meaningful. Like we talk about why gambling and fantasy football and things like that have changed the way people consume football. Well, I would argue that just having an extra group of fans that aren't even in this game have a vested interest in this game, Adam, changes everything. So I raise a glass to the rest of the group of five that's now looking around saying, well, it could be me in that college football playoff.
I'll toast you to that, Fitz. It's a great point. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I was calling the Army game today, and man, it is crazy how every single game just has more significance, especially for these top tier group of five programs. I mean, everyone around Army's program, Army's 3-0, and they've won 8 straight games, second longest win streak in the country, and everyone's talking about the playoff. If we can be the highest ranked group of five team, it just adds a new significance to everything around these group of five programs in college football. And to your point, instead of just tracking one conference, these group of five teams get to track every team across every conference in the group of five and try to figure out who, the AAC is battling with the Sun Belt and the Sun Belt's battling with Conference USA. It's a fun dynamic, and I love it. I mean, it's one of the things that the rule makers of college football, the college football gods, have gotten right was to get a playoff spot to the group of five.
I love that we can have meaningful conversations about the group of five and meaningful postseason conversations. I know so many people hate and despise the changes in college football and how it's a game that looks so different than maybe it looked 20, 25 years ago. Hell, it looks different than it looked last year. But I love that we get exciting conversations about teams like Memphis, about teams like, Fitz's UNLV. But who are you raising a glass to, Adam?
I'm raising a glass to Illinois. What a win by Illinois against Nebraska on Friday night. I can admit when I'm wrong, and I did not see this one coming. 9-point underdogs against Nebraska. Illinois came into that game and controlled it from start to finish. 31-24 win. Got a strip sack against Nebraska to seal the deal. They didn't flinch. Got it to overtime, and it ended up being a great battle. And Luke Altmaier, their quarterback, is legit. He's a dude. 4 touchdown passes, was throwing darts all night, 100% in control of that game. There was not a moment where I thought Luke Altmaier was flustered, didn't, even when he made a couple mistakes, didn't think he was rattled at all, and came back after some mistakes and played really, really well and finished that game on the road when their back was against the wall. So what's it mean now? It means that Illinois-Penn State's a top 25 matchup next weekend. Penn State's at home. Homecoming in Happy Valley brings in a 4-0 Illinois team. So, everyone get ready. Get your popcorn out. It's going to be a fun one at Penn State.
And of course, that happens right after I run my mouth repeatedly and then place a couple wagers on Nebraska. So thanks, Chief. That's fine. That's fine. I take back everything we said about Corn Hub last week. I will say this, though. I did find myself watching the Illini saying, man, better team than I thought. I'm just going to be honest. I was watching that game and I thought, man, this is a better team than I thought. Also, huge fan of getting these meaningful Friday night college football games. If I can just decide for a quick, just knowing that you're sitting there like, wait, this is an actual game. This isn't two random teams that nobody cares about. These are two programs that people know playing each other on a Friday night. Man, even if you're sitting in Chili's, it makes Friday nights better, Caroline. I'm all in on it.
I'm all in on the Thursday night games too. Give me all the South Alabama. There's only so much New England Patriots taking on the Jets football that you can watch on a Thursday. I love those games on Thursday as well. But if we're going to raise a glass, I have to raise a glass to James Madison, who dropped a 70 burger on UNC in UNC's house. And I don't know if that's some sort of record. I feel like it has to be. For, the James Madison program, that has to be a record for the number of points that UNC has given up at home. Surely it's up there in the top 5. So James Madison is collecting, I believe it was a $500,000 check to go into UNC and to make a massive statement like that. Their quarterback, Lonzo Barrett, had almost 500 total yards, both on the ground and in the air. Shout out. Cheers to you, James Madison, for a statement win like that.
Oh, that is a spectacular. That's modern college football right there, Breneman. Right? When JMU
70 to 50,
we're gonna lay 70. What do we do? This modern college. I love this. It's just give me video game football all day.
We should tie this in to pour one out for North Carolina at the same time. I mean that's embarrassing for UNC and Mac Brown and that program. I'll say James Madison hired Bob Chesney as their head coach this offseason, and I was one of the most underrated hires of the cycle. Bob Chesney built Holy Cross, and if you guys follow FCS football, Holy Cross was just a dominant program for 10, 15 years. Bob Chesney was the head coach and did a great job there, and he's bringing that same culture to JMU, and JMU is gonna wreak a lot of havoc, as they already are in college football this season.
I mean, if we're gonna pour one out, we'll go there. Like Caroline, you just gave us positive, give us the negative. Who would you pour one out for?
I know we touched on it, but I'm pouring one out for our sweet, sweet fallen brethren, Vanderbilt's kicker. If anybody wasn't tuned in to the Vanderbilt-Missouri game, it's double overtime. Vanderbilt attempts a 31-yard field goal to tie it and send it to triple overtime. Misses the field goal. Missouri wins it by 3. That is just such a debilitating feeling. It's within reach. He kicked him all night long. He's an SEC kicker. Of course he can hit it from 31. And it's just another heartbreaking loss for Vanderbilt. Last week, they were playing at Georgia State, which I don't know who scheduled that game for Vanderbilt, but whoever did probably deserves to be fired. But they give up a last-second touchdown to lose it. They turn around, go on the road at Missouri, a top 10 team. Vanderbilt is trying to collect all the wins that they possibly can to get to bowl eligibility this season, and they lose it in that fashion. It's just heartbreaking. So I'm pouring one out for our sweet friend, Vanderbilt's kicker.
Yeah, you got to feel for Vanderbilt's kicker because he's got a chance to make history. I mean, Vanderbilt doesn't get to win many of those types of games with a lot on the line, but
Vanderbilt doesn't get to win very many games, period.
I know. If you get a chance, you got to take advantage.
They're smart. They're smart. That's all I'm saying. They're smart people. Go ahead, Adam.
They can study.
They'll all make a lot of money. I am going to pour one out for our friends at Baylor who just gave up an opportunity to be the ones to officially have the sky falling at Colorado. If Colorado would have lost this game at home to Baylor, we would be on this show talking all about how Colorado and the Deion era is over and Deion's going to get run out of town. But Baylor had a field goal opportunity to go up 2 scores in the fourth quarter, missed the field goal. Shedeur Sanders does what Shedeur Sanders does, ties it up. Colorado wins in overtime, and Baylor now sits at 2-2 with blowing one of the biggest opportunities of the season to send us to give Colorado a really tough loss at home.
Yeah, this is my favorite. Better to be lucky than good. Like Colorado got lucky here, and
No doubt.
hey, good on you. And Shedeur getting it done. Travis Hunter, shout out to having just a career night. Absolutely nothing they could do to stop him. I think we've given him a lot of love on this show for a really good reason. But yeah, if you're Baylor, you're just sitting there in the locker room and you've got like what might have been playing in the background and everybody's crying right now because I just don't know how you even figure out how you lost that game. And this is that moment where I think there is sort of a clapback, a counterculture to this. If the entire world gets up for taking on Colorado, well, if that means you let them slip out of your fingers, that is going to be something that feels more devastating to a lot of locker rooms, Caroline.
Let him slip out of your fingers when you had so many opportunities to put it away. Yeah. And you bring up Travis Hunter, 7 receptions for 130 yards. Every time I see a Travis Hunter stat line, it hurts my brain. Because I'm trying to figure out how that is humanly possible. And oh yeah, by the way, he's also playing, 100 defensive snaps as well. It's like the Shohei Ohtani stat lines. Like he just did something that was never been done since 1913. And if Colorado would have lost that game, it would have been like truly Shohei Ohtani with the Los Angeles Angels. Of like Shohei Ohtani, pitched a shutout, had 3 home runs, and the Angels still lost. But good win and a gutsy win for Colorado, Adam.
Let's give credit, though, to Shedeur Sanders and what he's been able to do the last couple weeks.
Yes.
On this show, I posted a clip of on social media being very critical of Shedeur Sanders and how he handled the Nebraska loss and his attitude around that game. Since that game, Shedeur Sanders has looked like a different quarterback out there. Just from a leadership standpoint, he's looked poised and never flustered, and then he's performed well. I mean, 25 of 40 today and threw for 2 touchdowns and 300-some yards passing. He's now looking more like a QB1 that'll be one of the top couple quarterbacks picked in the NFL draft that can lead an NFL franchise, and that's ultimately what he's aiming for right now, and he needs to keep playing like that. But I want to give credit where credit's due, and Shedeur has made the improvement he had to make in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we'll always be consistent on, right? Like consistently tough on him when it's not good, consistently tip of the cap when it is. And that's all you can do in this situation. Shedeur and Travis Hunter, single-handedly, the two of them feel like they are willing this team to any win that they get. And, that's kudos to them because much like we said earlier, whole world knew Michigan was going to try and run the football. Well, the whole world knows that Shedeur's trying to get the ball to Travis Hunter when the game's on the line. And they still find a way to get it done. So you have to give a ton of credit.
And Colorado's 3-1. I mean, tied for first in the Big 12. Right. Don't blink. We may miss it, and Colorado will be 6-1, and we'll forget they're still a competitor.
God, the world is not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. Can I pour one out that involves pulling up a soapbox? All right, I'm going to ease my soapbox up here, and I'm going to step up on it because I'm not particularly tall, as you both know, and I'm going to look out to the crowd, and I'm going to say, dear college football gods, why do you do this to us? Why is your scheduling so awful? And I mean awful. Like we all on this show love college football at an unhealthy level. And even I found myself today rolling my eyes at Texas versus UL Monroe, Ohio State versus Marshall, Ole Miss versus Georgia Southern. I mean, this is just Penn State versus Kent State. What are we doing? At some point, like, we got to have some games. And the hard part is that we have major programs that still have played nobody. Like, how am I supposed to know anything about Ohio State right now? Because essentially they played Nashville Auto Diesel College 3 times in a row. Like, what does that mean to anybody? Like, sure, we can look at it and say they look super athletic, but my God, this is a joke at this point. And it's bad for the sport. It's bad for the sport overall that you've got some teams that have played and some teams that haven't. Like, none of this makes any sense to me, and I hate it.
The picture of Ohio State's schedule against Michigan's schedule through the first 4 weeks is the exact picture that shows us what's wrong with college football right now. And these are teams in the same conference that are rivals, the biggest rivalry in college football, probably, and are both competing for conference championships. And Ohio State has played Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. And Michigan has played Fresno State, Texas, USC, and I think Arkansas State. And Texas is the 3rd-ranked team in the country, USC number 11. I mean, it could not be more different through the first few weeks. Oh, yeah, Ohio State had a bye week thrown in there, too, in between those 3 games. So something needs to give here where college football scheduling gets a little bit more regulated when it comes to non-conference games, because it's crazy that Michigan and Ohio State are in the same conference and that scheduling difference is able to happen.
I also look at Ole Miss. I want so badly to have a conversation about, how many SEC teams are true national title contenders. And right now, I think so. But how am I supposed to know when you play Butt Crack State University for each of the first 4 weeks of the season?
When you get a scholarship to Butt Crack State, do you tell people?
Yeah,
I think that you should.
You tweet about it. You post it.
You celebrate
Instagram.
the wins. Always.
Okay, no.
But if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, why would Ohio State do anything different? Why would Ole Miss do anything different? Because in the college football playoff, you're rewarded for wins and losses. You are not rewarded necessarily for strength or difficulty of schedule. That's going to be a topic that's brought up whenever you're kind of splitting hairs, if you're getting an at-large bid. But if you're a 12-0 Ohio State, you're getting in. If you're an 11-1 Ole Miss, you're getting into the college football playoff. It doesn't matter if 4 of those wins come from whoeversville, nowheresville state. So I think that it needs to become more of a playoff conversation. It needs to become more of a talking point when we're talking about the playoff. It's not just about the record. It's not just about going 12-0. It's who the heck have you beaten? Because I'm with you. It's week 4 and I still don't know anything about 2 of the best teams in the country and some of the best teams in the country that haven't played anyone.
But couldn't college football, even if we all agree that, hey, they're not going to start scheduling tougher teams, they don't want to, fine. Couldn't they at least as a whole come up with a policy of, for example, you can't play a non-conference opponent 2 straight weeks, right? So now you're forced. Every other week has to be a conference game at the very least. That at least forces you to take on somebody of meaning at the beginning of the season, or force everybody in the country to start with a rivalry matchup from a conference. Like, force everybody to have a meaningful game 1 or game 2. I don't care. You got to force something in the first month of the season for us to have any idea, because it's such a weird advantage to think that one team is over here, Adam, playing a bunch of preseason games, basically getting everything locked in and ready, and then the other teams are sitting there already trying to figure out how to manage their quarterbacks because their quarterbacks aren't playing against better opponents.
It's the reason we're seeing some of these non-conference rivalries die in college football, because coaches don't want to play them. If they don't have to play their rival, why would they want to play their rival if it's not a mandated game in the conference and they could play a MAC school instead? So I mean, Penn State Pitt is the great example. No one wants to play that game because they're non-conference, and Penn State would rather play Kent State and Bowling Green and then be ready to go come Big Ten play. It's the reason that Wake Forest just balled out of their game against Ole Miss and paid $1 million to not play Ole Miss next season, so that they don't have to play a team like Ole Miss. They can now schedule, I think they're scheduling Oregon State instead of Ole Miss. But that's going to continue to happen in college football until something from the powers to be make some rules around what you're able to schedule, what you're not able to schedule from a non-conference standpoint. And at least the conferences should have something to do with this. The Michigan and Ohio State difference in schedule is just the wildest thing to me, because they're in the same conference, they're rivals, and they look that different through the first 4 weeks.
And wouldn't it be within the realm of the Big Ten's power to come to their members and say, hey, you have to start with the Big Ten matchup. That's how we're going to schedule from now on. You have to start with the Big Ten matchup.
But to Ohio State's defense, what Ohio State would say is the Big Ten plays one more conference game than the SEC does. So that's one extra tough game that the SEC and these other conferences don't play. So Ohio State's saying, we want to save all of our non-conference games for these warm-up games, so we don't have preseason. And for some reason, Michigan's AD wanted to schedule Texas and have that as an early season game, which is fun for us as the fans. But now USC is a conference game, so that's going to be there no matter what. But it's just interesting how it all plays out. And at the end of the day, to Caroline's point, yes, it looks good on paper, and Ohio State's going to say, they're feeling good with 3 wins. At some point, weak schedules, when you're vying for those final playoff spots, at some point it's gonna come into play. And who had tough schedules and who didn't, and who has quality wins and who has games that were close that shouldn't have been close. They should have dominated because they scheduled some weak opponents.
And we also have to acknowledge that not all non-conference matchups, not all non-conference Power 4 matchups, I should add, are created equally. Look at Ole Miss, for example. We just brought them up. Well, they played an ACC team. That's a non-conference Power 4 opponent, but that's not really an opponent that's in the same stratosphere as Ole Miss. I think the perfect scenario for me, the more and more college football resembles the NFL, the more and more I'll make these parallels. What does the NFL do? You play another conference, you play another division, and the best team in that division plays the best team in that division. Like you play a last place schedule, you play a first place schedule. I think that's what you should do in college football. I would love to see a, Michigan Georgia game at the beginning of the season. I know we understand that we saw a Texas Michigan game at the beginning of this past season, but then you have schedule parity. The worst plays the worst, the best plays the best. It's a better product for all of the fans. And you don't have these, divisions and schedules.
I love the concept of it, but then it puts the Georgias behind the 8 ball compared to the Vandy's from day one. Like Vandy's always playing
They're
the last
already
place
behind
schedule.
the 8 ball.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They're Vanderbilt.
No, but Georgia will be facing such a tough schedule comparatively because Georgia's turned around saying, well, you want me to take on all the conference winners? And then Vandy's turned around saying, no, that's fine. We'll take on all the conference losers. Like, it's an interesting idea. I just don't know that you could ever execute it. I don't know. And the biggest problem with all of this that we come back to all the time is that the NCAA needs a commissioner. They need somebody that will actually make schools fight for each other because at some point, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but like the difference is the NFL owners all understand that they all have to make money for any of them to make money. And college football, who's going to be responsible for saving college football to schedule a game week 1 if it's completely unnecessary?
Fitz, you make a great point, and I'll end my thoughts on this with what you just said. College football needs a college football commissioner, and it is crazy that the most powerful people making decisions for college football are the commissioners of the conference, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC. And Greg Sankey also is responsible for basketball and lacrosse and field hockey and swimming and diving and baseball and has to make decisions for all those sports too. So the fact that college football doesn't have one person who makes decisions in the best interest of college football is crazy. And it looks like it will change pretty soon. At some point, the power conferences are going to break off. Everyone knows that and has been talking about it. It'll change. But right now, there is no leader of college football, and no leader gets you bad decisions, and bad decisions like the way scheduling is formatted right now in college football.
Very well said. Well said. That is going to do it for us today on the pod. Also, Florida State won a game. So,
woo!
Yay for Florida State. I admittedly am a little sad that the Calgorithm is gone. I enjoyed all the Cal memes, but that's going to do it for us today. You can find him on Twitter at Adam Breneman81. You can find him at Jason Fitz. I am at Caroline Fenton 1. Like the pod, subscribe, review it, tell a friend, tell the people that you hate, tell a James Madison fan, because they're probably riding high today. We got to talk about them on the podcast. Always a great day when we can talk about JMU. We will be back on Wednesday morning with a full Week 5 preview right here on the College Football Power Hour. We're out.